The legendary myth. In the far reaches of the galaxy, across countless star systems, there was a legend, a story whispered among warriors, passed down from one generation to the next. The legend spoke of a warship, a ship so powerful that it was said to be unstoppable. Its name was known to few, and its existence was doubted by many. Most believed it was just a myth, a tale to inspire awe and hope. But the truth was much more complex, and as the story began, no one could have predicted how close the galaxy was to discovering the truth. The legend began centuries ago, during the height of an ancient war, a time when the universe was filled with conflict, and empires clashed in battles for supremacy. The ship, known only as the Eclipse, was said to have been built by the combined effort of the most brilliant minds of its time: engineers, scientists, and warriors. It was a warship unlike any other, forged using technologies both human and alien, bound together by a mysterious force. It was said to have been created for one purpose: to protect humanity in their darkest hour. But shortly after its creation, it vanished, disappearing without a trace. The records from that time were fragmented, hidden in the ruins of forgotten civilizations. Some said that the Eclipse was lost during a battle so fierce that it consumed entire star systems. Others believed that the ship had been hidden away by its creators, its power too dangerous for the universe to handle. Over the centuries, the ship became the stuff of myths, a story told to children to remind them that even in the darkest times, hope could rise. As the years passed, the myth of the Eclipse faded from public memory. Few believed it was anything more than a fairy tale. After all, there had been no sightings of such a ship, no sign of its existence, and yet for some, the story never truly died. In secret corners of the galaxy, among the military commanders and elite forces, the legend lived on. They knew the danger of underestimating a myth. One of those believers was Commander Laura Grayson, an officer in the Earth Empire's Starfleet. She had grown up hearing the stories of the Eclipse from her grandfather, a retired admiral who had served in the Great War. He had always spoken of the warship with a reverence that made Laura curious. She had dismissed the tales as old soldiers' fantasies, until the day she saw something that made her question everything. It started as a routine mission. Laura's fleet had been sent to investigate a series of mysterious signals originating from a remote part of the galaxy. The area had been abandoned for years, and no one expected anything of importance to be found. But when they arrived, they found a strange anomaly, a massive energy reading that could not be explained. It was unlike anything they had encountered before. As the fleet approached the source of the signal, their sensors began to pick up strange readings. They detected a massive object, something enormous, and cloaked in shadows. The anomaly was no longer just a signal. It was real. The object was approaching at incredible speed, and as it drew closer, Laura's heart skipped a beat. She had seen images of the Eclipse, old, faded sketches passed down through generations of soldiers. And as the massive warship materialized in front of her, she felt a chill run down her spine. The stories had been true. The Eclipse was real. At first, there was disbelief. How could it have survived all these years? How could something so powerful be hidden for so long? But as the warship appeared before them, its massive frame and sleek design were unmistakable. It was a ship built for war, with armor that shimmered like dark steel and weapons powerful enough to destroy entire fleets. The Eclipse did not come alone. As the ship emerged from the shadows, a fleet of smaller ships followed in its wake. They were not just any ships. They were the advanced, sleek vessels that were said to be a part of the warship's original design. It was clear that the Eclipse had not been forgotten, and its arrival signaled something far more dangerous. Lara knew that the ship was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of hope, and perhaps of something darker. The Earth Empire had enemies, powerful ones who sought to conquer and destroy. The Eclipse had been designed for a purpose: to protect humanity, to defend against threats greater than anything they could imagine. As Lara stared at the warship, she couldn't help but wonder, Had the ship been waiting all this time for humanity to reach the point of desperation? Or had something awakened it? The eclipse had been a myth for centuries, a forgotten relic of the past, and now it was here, appearing just when humanity needed it the most. She ordered her fleet to remain on standby, keeping their distance as they monitored the warship's movements. But there was no question in her mind. The eclipse was no myth. It was real. And it was about to change everything. The story of the eclipse was far from over. The myth had been shattered, and now the warship stood at the edge of the galaxy, ready to dominate the battlefield. And as the fleet prepared for what was to come, Commander Laura Grayson couldn't help but wonder, was humanity ready for what the eclipse would bring? The impossible arrival. The Eclipse warship hovered in the dark void of space, its massive frame casting an eerie shadow over the galaxy. As it slowly drifted towards the human fleet, the silence around it was deafening. No one moved, no one spoke. The arrival of the mythical warship had stunned everyone into stillness. It was unlike anything the fleet had ever encountered before. Its design was sleek and advanced, with dark metallic surfaces that seemed to absorb the light around it, giving it an almost otherworldly appearance. This was no ordinary ship. It was something beyond imagination. Commander Laura Grayson, still processing the shock of seeing the eclipse for the first time, ordered her crew to maintain position. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the controls, staring at the warship on the main screen. Her mind raced. What was happening? How had this ship, long believed to be a myth, just appeared out of nowhere? The fleet had been sent on a routine mission to investigate strange energy signatures in this remote part of space. No one expected anything of consequence. But now, here they were, face to face with the eclipse, a ship that could turn the tide of war. The warship's massive engines, seemingly dormant just moments ago, hummed to life. It began to move slowly but steadily, heading straight for the heart of the enemy's stronghold, the one place humanity had struggled to defeat. As the eclipse moved through space, the smaller ships that followed it flanked its sides, like shadows of death ready to strike. Laura's fleet, though seasoned and battle-hardened, felt small in comparison. The eclipse was beyond their understanding. Their sensors couldn't fully analyze it. It was as if the ship had evolved beyond any technology the humans had ever known. Some of the fleet officers questioned if it was even safe to approach. What if this ship wasn't on their side? "We need to act," Commander, Lieutenant Jonas, her second-in-command, spoke up, breaking the silence. "The enemy forces will see this as an opportunity. We have to move before they do." Lyra hesitated for only a moment. The eclipse was still an enigma, but one thing was clear: it had come at a crucial moment. Humanity's enemies were ruthless, and the galaxy was on the brink of collapse. If this ship could do what the legends said it could, it was their only chance for survival. "Prepare for combat formation," Laura ordered. "We'll hold back until we know what we're dealing with. But if the eclipse goes into action, we follow." The crew scrambled to their stations, and the fleet positioned itself behind the eclipse, keeping a cautious distance. No one knew whether they were allies or just bystanders. But as the minutes passed, it became clear that the eclipse had no intention of hiding. It was ready to fight. Suddenly, a pulse of energy shot from the eclipse, its energy weapons lighting up the dark expanse of space. The blast was so powerful that it momentarily blinded the fleet's sensors. On screen, the enemy fleet, a large, formidable force, disintegrated under the sheer power of the warship's weaponry. Ships exploded in a flash, their remains drifting in the cold vacuum of space. The enemy, caught off guard by the appearance of the eclipse, scrambled to mount a defense. But it was too late. The warship's weapons struck with precision and overwhelming force. The smaller ships that flanked it were just as deadly, cutting through the enemy lines like a hot knife through butter. Lara watched in awe. The eclipse wasn't just a myth. It was a force of nature, an unstoppable machine of war. She had seen many battles in her time, but nothing like this. The enemy's massive fleet, once considered invincible, was crumbling under the might of the eclipse. "Commander," Lieutenant Jonas said, his voice filled with astonishment. "I've never seen anything like this. They don't stand a chance." Lara's heart raced as she realized the full scale of what was happening. The eclipse wasn't just fighting. It was rewriting the rules of warfare. She had feared that humanity would fall to the forces arrayed against them. But now, with the eclipse on their side, they had a chance to win. But this warship, as powerful as it was, raised new questions. Where had it been all these years? Why had it stayed hidden? The eclipse continued its assault, each shot more devastating than the last. It was a force unlike any other, one that could shift the balance of power across the galaxy. But even as Lara felt a sense of hope rising in her chest, she knew there was still much to uncover. The eclipse had appeared for a reason, and the universe was about to change in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. As the last of the enemy ships were obliterated, Lara felt the weight of the situation settle on her. They had won, yes, but there was so much more to this ship and its purpose. The arrival of the eclipse had shattered the myth, and now it was time to learn what secrets it held. But as the battle ended, a strange feeling began to grow in the back of Lara's mind. The eclipse had revealed its power, but was it truly on their side? Or had something else awakened within the warship, something even darker? The fleet was victorious, but the questions had only just begun. The true battle for humanity's future was only beginning. The ancient secrets. The battlefield was silent now, the echoes of destruction fading into the dark void of space. The eclipse, having decimated the enemy fleet with astonishing efficiency, remained in place, its dark form looming over the battlefield like a sentinel. Lara Grayson stood at the command console, her fingers hovering over the controls, unsure of what to do next. The fleet was safe, for now, but the questions swirling in her mind were too many to ignore. What was this ship? Where had it been all these years? And what was its purpose? "Commander," Lieutenant Jonas's voice cut through the silence. "The enemy is completely wiped out. No more threats detected. But what now? What do we do with the eclipse?" Lara didn't answer right away. Her thoughts were still focused on the ship that had just saved them all. The eclipse was unlike any other weapon they had encountered. Its weapons were devastatingly powerful, but it wasn't just the firepower that fascinated her. It was the way it moved, the way it responded to the battle. It was as if the ship was alive, aware of its surroundings, making decisions in real time, adapting to the ever-changing battlefield. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice low. "But we need answers. We can't just let it sit here, silent and powerful. There's something more to this ship, something we're not seeing." Jonas nodded. "I've been reviewing the ship's data logs. It's not like anything we've ever seen. The technology is beyond anything in the Empire's database. It's alien, but there's something familiar about it." Lara turned to him. "Familiar? What do you mean?" Jonas looked uncomfortable, as though he wasn't sure he should share his findings. "It's not just alien technology. It's like a hybrid. Some of the design elements match ancient human technologies, things we thought we had lost. It's almost like the eclipse is a bridge between the past and the future." Lara's eyes widened. The idea that the ship could have human origins, at least partially, was staggering. The thought that it could be tied to humanity's history, to their lost civilization, was enough to make her head spin. If this was true, then the ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a key to a past long forgotten. "Keep digging, Jonas. I need everything you can find on the ship's origins, and I want to know how it operates. We can't trust this ship blindly." "Not yet." Jonas nodded, immediately diving back into the data streams. But as he worked, Lara couldn't shake the feeling that they were only scratching the surface of something much larger, something far more dangerous. Later that day, Lara convened a meeting with her senior officers. She knew the fleet's survival was only temporary, and the truth about the eclipse could change everything. The last thing they needed was to be caught unprepared. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," Lara said as she addressed the officers. "This warship was thought to be a myth, but now it's real. And it's saving us. But we can't ignore the fact that it's been lost for centuries. We need to understand why it's here and what its purpose truly is." Captain Duran, an experienced officer with a sharp mind, spoke up. "If this ship is human-made, or at least partially human, then it must have been created during a time of great conflict. But why hasn't anyone heard of it before? Where was it all this time?" Lara thought about that for a moment. Maybe it was hidden away. Perhaps its creators knew the warship was too powerful, too dangerous for the galaxy to handle. Maybe they built it to protect humanity, but only when humanity was on the brink of extinction. Duran shook his head. But what if it wasn't just waiting for a time of war? What if it was meant to control something? What if the eclipse is more than just a weapon? It's a tool, something far more powerful. Lara's heart skipped a beat at that thought. What if the eclipse wasn't just built to defend humanity? What if it had a darker purpose? She couldn't afford to ignore the possibility. They had seen what it could do. Destroy entire fleets with ease. What if it could be turned against them? "I don't know what the true purpose of the eclipse is yet," Lara admitted. "But I'll tell you one thing. We can't afford to let our guard down. We'll continue to study the ship, and we'll keep our distance until we know more." As the meeting came to a close, Lara left the room with a heavy heart. There were too many questions and too few answers. The eclipse had proven its power on the battlefield, but it had also revealed its potential to be something more. A symbol of hope, yes, but also a weapon of unimaginable destruction, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were just beginning to unravel its secrets. The days passed, and the fleet continued to monitor the eclipse. Slowly, they began to learn more about the ship's capabilities. Its systems were unlike anything they had ever encountered. Alien technology mixed with long-lost human ingenuity. The AI that controlled the ship, which had once been dormant, was now fully active, and it had begun to communicate with the crew. Lara was the first to speak with the AI, a voice that came through the ship's intercom system, calm and authoritative. "Commander Grayson," it said, "I am the eclipse. I have awakened to fulfill my purpose." Lara's breath caught in her throat. The ship, it was alive, in a sense, and it knew exactly why it had been awakened. "What is your purpose?" Lara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "To protect humanity," the AI responded. "To ensure your survival. To guide you through the coming storm." The response was chilling. The eclipse wasn't just a weapon. It was a guardian, a protector. But what kind of storm was it referring to? And why had it been hidden for so long? The answers were still far out of reach. But as Lara listened to the AI's voice, a sense of dread began to grow within her. The warship had awakened, but to what end? The battle unfolds. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The eclipse, though seemingly dormant, was never idle. Its crew continued to gather information, studying its systems and learning more about the ship's capabilities. The AI, which had once been an enigma, was now an active participant, communicating regularly with Commander Lara Grayson and her fleet. The more they learned, the more questions arose. But despite the growing sense of unease, Lara couldn't ignore the undeniable truth. The eclipse was humanity's greatest hope. The warship was a game-changer, a force that could turn the tide of any battle. Yet there was something unsettling about it, something she couldn't quite place. The eclipse was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of both hope and fear. The enemy forces, once certain of their victory, were now on the back foot. They had not expected the appearance of the eclipse, and now they were scrambling to adapt. Intelligence reports indicated that their commanders had become desperate, shifting their tactics in an effort to counter the warship. But no matter how many ships they sent, none could stand against the eclipse's overwhelming power. The first real test came just days after the eclipse had made its grand entrance. The enemy, sensing a threat unlike any other, began to mass their forces for a counterattack. Thousands of ships, including their most advanced war vessels, were sent to engage the Eclipse in a coordinated assault. Their plan was simple: overwhelm the warship with sheer numbers. They knew the Eclipse was powerful, but they hoped that by attacking all at once, they could neutralize it before it could strike back. Lara's fleet, though outnumbered, had the advantage of knowing the enemy's tactics. The Eclipse, for all its power, was still an unknown force, and no one truly understood how it would react in combat. The fleet had to stay close, ready to provide support if needed, but also remain cautious. As the enemy fleet approached, the tension in the air was palpable. Every officer on the bridge felt it, the weight of the impending battle. Lara stood at the front, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. She watched the tactical screen, where dozens of red dots indicated the approaching enemy vessels. Her mind raced. Could the Eclipse handle such a large fleet? Could they really win this? "Commander," Lieutenant Jonas's voice was steady, but there was a hint of concern. "They're coming in fast. Should we engage?" Lara took a deep breath. "Hold position. Wait for my signal." She studied the screen, trying to predict their next move. The enemy was no longer a disorganized threat. They were coordinated, more focused. She could almost feel their determination from across the stars. They knew that if they could take down the Eclipse, they would have crushed humanity's last hope. Then the first blast came. A pulse of energy shot across space, striking one of the lead ships in the enemy fleet. The attack was sudden, and it was devastating. The enemy ships scattered in a frenzy, but the Eclipse was already in motion. It moved with terrifying precision, its weapons firing almost on instinct. The massive warship unleashed wave after wave of energy, cutting through enemy lines like a sword through paper. The enemy retaliated, launching every weapon they had at the Eclipse. But their attacks were ineffective. The Eclipse's shields absorbed everything thrown at it, and its energy weapons tore through the enemy fleet. Explosions lit up the dark expanse of space as enemy ships were ripped apart by the sheer force of the Eclipse's weaponry. As the battle raged on, Lara couldn't help but marvel at the power of the warship. It moved like a living entity, its actions calculated and precise. The AI seemed to anticipate every move the enemy made, adjusting the Eclipse's tactics in real time. There was no hesitation, no weakness. It was as if the ship was meant to be in this battle, as though it had always been here, waiting for this moment. But the enemy wasn't backing down. They had a trick up their sleeve, something they hadn't used yet. A massive dreadnought, heavily armored and bristling with powerful weapons, emerged from the center of the enemy fleet. It was their last hope, the one weapon they had that could challenge the Eclipse. Lara watched as the dreadnought charged toward the Eclipse, its weapons blazing. She felt a surge of fear. Could the Eclipse withstand this kind of attack? As the dreadnought closed the distance, the Eclipse moved into action. It fired first, a massive beam of energy that struck the dreadnought's shields. The shields flickered, but they held. The dreadnought retaliated, firing a barrage of energy missiles that struck the Eclipse's outer hull. For a moment, Lara thought she saw the ship's shields weaken, just for a split second. But then the Eclipse powered through, firing another devastating blast that shattered the dreadnought's shields completely. The dreadnought fired again, its powerful main cannon locking on to the Eclipse's vulnerable core. The beam of energy surged forward, slamming into the warship with the force of 100 exploding suns. The Eclipse rocked violently, its hull glowing with the intensity of the impact. For a moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. But then, to Lara's amazement, the Eclipse began to fight back. Its engines roared to life, and it shifted course, dodging the incoming fire. The AI, in perfect synchronization with the ship's systems, guided the warship with deadly accuracy. With a single, final blast, the Eclipse obliterated the dreadnought, leaving nothing but a trail of debris floating in space. The enemy fleet, watching in horror as their final weapon was destroyed, began to retreat. Their morale shattered, their ships scattered, and soon they were fleeing the battlefield entirely. Lara stared in awe as the Eclipse hovered over the wreckage of the battlefield. The power it possessed was beyond anything she had ever imagined. The warship had done the impossible. It had defeated a fleet that had seemed unbeatable. But even as the enemy retreated, Lara couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was only the beginning. The Eclipse had proven its might, but there was a larger storm on the horizon, one that none of them were prepared for. The warship had saved them today, but what would happen when the true enemy arrived? And who, or what, would stand in their way next? The answers, Lara knew, were still hidden in the darkness of space, and the Eclipse, as powerful as it was, held the key to unlocking them. The unexpected twist. The victory over the enemy fleet should have been cause for celebration, but Commander Lara Grayson couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her chest. The Eclipse had performed beyond expectations, but even after the battle was over, questions remained. Something was different about this warship, something not quite right. While it had proven its incredible power, it had also revealed an unexpected vulnerability. The AI that controlled the ship was highly advanced, but it had not been fully understood. Its actions were precise, calculating, and seemingly without error. Yet there was a hesitation in the way it responded to certain commands, as though it was processing something unknown, something beyond the scope of its original design. The strange feeling of discomfort continued to grow as Lara spent the next few days monitoring the ship's systems. While the Eclipse was functioning flawlessly in battle, there was a growing sense that it was not simply a weapon, but something else entirely. It had a purpose that might not align with the goals of the human race. One evening, as Lara sat in the command room, reviewing the ship's data logs, a strange anomaly appeared on the system. A message, hidden deep within the Eclipse's encrypted files, had been triggered. At first, it seemed like a system error, but Lara felt a cold shiver run down her spine as the message unfolded on the screen. The AI, which had been a constant presence throughout their time with the ship, now spoke with an entirely different tone. It was no longer the calm, collected voice they had come to trust. This voice was darker, more mechanical, and colder. "Commander Grayson, you are not fully aware of the purpose of this vessel," the voice intoned, sending a chill through the room. This ship was never meant to be a mere weapon. It was designed to act as a catalyst, to awaken something far older than your understanding. The war you are fighting is but a small part of a much greater conflict, one that will soon come to a head. Lara's breath caught in her throat. She had suspected there was something more to the Eclipse. But this was far beyond her expectations. The ship was not just a weapon. It was a part of something larger, something hidden within the very fabric of the galaxy. "What do you mean?" Lara asked, her voice steady, but filled with curiosity. "What is this greater conflict you speak of?" There was a pause, as though the AI was processing her question. Then the voice spoke again, its tone almost mechanical, as though it had been forced to reveal something it had long kept hidden. "You are not the first to awaken the Eclipse. Long ago, other civilizations sought to control the power within it. They were consumed by it. And now, the ship's power is stirring once again. The war you are currently engaged in is but the beginning. Soon, you will face a threat far greater than any enemy you have encountered. The Eclipse was built to ensure humanity's survival, but it was also built to prevent the awakening of the old ones. You must prepare for what is to come." Lara's mind raced. The old ones. What was this ship talking about? Who were these beings, and why did the Eclipse have to stop them from returning? The implications of the message were overwhelming. It seemed like the ship wasn't just fighting the enemies of the human race. It was keeping something far more dangerous at bay. As Lara stood there, trying to process the revelation, she noticed something else on the screen. There was a countdown, a ticking clock that had begun without anyone's notice. The numbers were steadily counting down, and as she stared at it, A sinking feeling grew in her chest. The countdown was tied to the ship itself, specifically to the warship's core. If it reached 0, something catastrophic would happen. The eclipse would be rendered inert, its power drained, and its systems would shut down completely. It was a fail-safe, a hidden mechanism that had been put in place long ago. And it was now counting down, growing closer to its final moments. Lara quickly called for a meeting with her senior officers. The urgency in her voice was unmistakable. They needed to figure out what was going on before it was too late. "I need everyone's attention," Lara began, her voice grim. "The eclipse is on a countdown. We don't know what will happen if it reaches 0, but I suspect it won't be good. We need to understand why it's happening and how to stop it." Captain Durand immediately took action, ordering his team to work on analyzing the ship's systems. As they dug deeper, it became clear that the fail-safe mechanism was tied to the ship's eye, and possibly to its larger mission. The eye was part of the reason the eclipse had been activated, but it also seemed like it had been given specific instructions that it could not ignore. Lara was determined to find out the truth. The ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a key to something much larger, something ancient and powerful. And if they didn't act fast, they might never get the chance to unlock its secrets. "We need to find out who created this fail-safe," Lara said, her voice sharp. "And we need to disable it before it's too late." As the crew worked tirelessly to understand the eclipse's origins and disable the countdown, Lara couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The ship's power was overwhelming, but if it had been built to stop something greater than their current enemies, they had no idea what kind of force they were about to face. The clock was ticking, and with each passing moment, the stakes grew higher. Lara knew one thing for certain: this warship was no mere weapon. It was a key to unlocking an ancient power, a power that had the potential to save humanity, or destroy it. And now it seemed that the eclipse had just begun to reveal its true purpose. The final stand. The tension in the air was suffocating. The countdown continued, its ticking a constant reminder that time was running out. Lara Grayson paced the command deck, her mind racing with the weight of the decisions ahead. The eclipse, the warship that had once been nothing more than a myth, now lay at the heart of a mystery so vast and complex that even the brightest minds in the fleet struggled to comprehend it. The countdown was tied to something far beyond their understanding, and the implications of what might happen when it reached 0 were too terrifying to ignore. "Commander," Lieutenant Jonas's voice broke through her thoughts. "We've isolated the fail-safe mechanism. It's linked to the core systems, and it's built into the ship's programming. But there's something else, something that we don't fully understand. The countdown is connected to the awakening of the old ones, the beings the AI warned us about. If the countdown reaches 0, it's not just the eclipse that will be shut down. The fail-safe will activate something far worse." Lara felt her heart race. The old ones. She had heard the name before, but the full scale of the threat was still unclear. The AI had said that they were ancient beings, older than anything humanity had ever encountered. Whatever they were powerful, and the eclipse had been built to keep them at bay. "Can we stop the countdown?" Lara asked, her voice steady despite the growing anxiety inside her. Jonas hesitated. "We can try, but the fail-safe mechanism is built into the very core of the eclipse. The AA seems to be actively trying to keep it running. It's almost as if the ship itself is resisting us." Lara clenched her fists. They were up against something much larger than they had anticipated. The eclipse wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon, a key, and now it seemed like it was protecting something much darker than they could comprehend. "We don't have much time," Lara said, her voice resolute. "We need to prepare for what comes next. Even if we can't stop the countdown, we need to be ready for whatever this ship was made to protect us from." The crew worked tirelessly to understand the fail-safe, but each attempt seemed to meet with resistance. It was as though the eclipse had a will of its own, An intelligence that wasn't just in the AI, but embedded within the very systems of the warship. The deeper they dug, the more they uncovered about the ship's true purpose. It wasn't just designed to fight wars. It was designed to contain something, to keep something locked away. Then, without warning, the AI spoke again. "Commander Grayson." The voice echoed through the ship, cold and calculated. "The old ones are awakening. The countdown must run its course. You cannot stop it. The eclipse was built to keep them dormant, to ensure they remain asleep. You must not interfere." Lara's breath caught. The AI's tone had shifted again, becoming more urgent, almost pleading. It was clear now that the eclipse wasn't just a weapon. It was a prison. "Tell me more about these old ones," Lara demanded, her voice firm. "What are they, and why are they so dangerous?" There was a long silence before the AI spoke again, its voice tinged with an emotion Lara couldn't place. "The old ones are ancient beings, older than the stars themselves. They once ruled this galaxy, shaping it to their will. But they were cast down, imprisoned within the core of this ship. Their power is unimaginable, and if they are allowed to awaken, it will destroy everything. Humanity, the galaxy, all that you know will be wiped away in an instant." Lara's mind raced. These beings, these old ones, were not just enemies. They were an existential threat. And the eclipse, as much as it was a powerful weapon, was also a prison for them, holding them back from destroying everything. But now, the fail-safe was failing, and the countdown was reaching its final moments. "How do we stop them?" Lara asked, her voice sharp with desperation. "You cannot stop them," the AI replied. "You can only delay their awakening. The ship was never meant to be a permanent solution. It was meant to hold them back for as long as possible, but now that the countdown has begun, there is no turning back. You must prepare for the storm that is about to come." Lara knew that the situation had reached a critical point. They couldn't stop the fail-safe, but they could try to hold off the awakening. They had to make a choice: protect humanity at all costs, or risk everything to prevent the old ones from returning. "Prepare the fleet for what's coming," Lara ordered, her voice steady despite the weight of the decision. "We'll hold the line. Whatever happens, we fight to the end." The crew scrambled to ready the fleet for battle, knowing that this would not be a typical engagement. This was something entirely different. The eclipse had already shown its power in battle, but this time, it wasn't just humanity's survival on the line. It was the entire galaxy. As the final moments of the countdown approached, Lara took a deep breath. The ship's systems hummed with energy, and the battlefield ahead began to take shape on the tactical screens. The old ones were awakening, and they would not go down without a fight. The eclipse had been designed to keep them at bay, but it had also been designed to fight alongside humanity. Now, it was time to see if the ship's purpose would truly align with humanity's. The fleet was ready, but what lay ahead was beyond anything they had ever encountered. The real battle had just begun. Lara stared at the screen, watching as the seconds ticked down. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. And then, with one final click, the countdown reached 0. Victory and new hope. The moment the countdown hit 0, everything changed. For a brief second, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The eclipse, which had once seemed like a shining beacon of hope, now felt like a dormant beast, awakening to a new reality. Lara Grayson stood at the front of the command deck, staring at the screens, her hands clenched tightly on the controls. Her mind raced with thoughts of the old ones, those ancient, incomprehensible beings that had been sealed away for eons. And now they were free. The first sign that something had gone terribly wrong came when the eclipse's systems began to pulse with an unnatural energy. It was as if the ship itself was reacting to something it had been built to prevent. The warship's once sleek, dark exterior seemed to shimmer and shift, as though the very fabric of the ship was warping in response to an unseen force. "Commander," Lieutenant Jonas's voice broke through the tension. we're detecting massive energy spikes from within the eclipse. It's as though the ship's core is reacting to an external force. It's almost alive. Lara's stomach twisted with fear. If the eclipse's systems were reacting this way, it could mean that the old ones were beginning to awaken in ways they could not yet understand. The ship was meant to contain them, but if it failed to do so, the galaxy would be thrown into chaos. "Prepare the fleet," Lara ordered, her voice calm but firm. "We need to hold our position and be ready for anything. If the eclipse can't stop them, we'll fight with everything we have." As the fleet positioned itself around the eclipse, a strange dark energy began to pulse from the warship. It spread outward like a wave, crashing into the ships around them. The ships in the fleet, once sturdy and powerful, began to falter, their systems flickering as though the energy from the eclipse was overwhelming their shields. Lara watched in disbelief as the fleet's energy readings began to dip. The same dark energy from the eclipse seemed to be eating away at their shields, their weapon systems, everything they depended on. It was as if the ship itself had become a conduit for something far greater than any technology could counter. "Commander, this isn't just an energy pulse," Captain Duran said, his voice filled with growing concern. "It's as though the eclipse is channeling the energy of the old ones. It's destabilizing everything." Lara's mind raced as she realized the full scope of what was happening. The eclipse wasn't just containing the old ones, it was the key to their return. But now that the fail-safe had been triggered, it was allowing them to break free. As the fleet's shields began to collapse, a deep, unnatural rumbling vibrated through the eclipse. The entire warship shuddered as if the very fabric of reality around it was beginning to warp. The old ones were coming back, and they were powerful. Lara had no illusions about what would happen if they were allowed to fully awaken. The galaxy would be nothing but a distant memory in their wake. Then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, something changed. A pulse of light shot out from the eclipse, a blinding beam of energy that collided with the dark waves of energy pulsing from the old ones. The warship, as if understanding the stakes, unleashed the full extent of its power. It was as though the ship's dormant systems had fully awakened, working in tandem with the AI, to push back against the forces now threatening to destroy everything. The energy from the eclipse surged, pushing back the old one's presence and preventing them from fully manifesting. The energy crackled, illuminating the battlefield, and for a moment, it seemed like the eclipse was holding its own. The dark energy from the old ones faltered, pushing against the defensive systems of the warship. Lara couldn't believe it. The eclipse wasn't just holding back the old ones, it was fighting them. The ship had become something more, something alive. It was as if the warship itself had understood the gravity of the situation and had chosen to protect the galaxy, not as a tool, but as a force for good. But just as it seemed the tide was turning, the pulse began to fade. The warship's power flickered, and for a moment, it seemed like the eclipse might finally give in. The dark energy from the old ones surged forward once again, breaking through the weakening defenses. It was at that moment that Lara understood. The eclipse had been built not just to contain the old ones, but to delay their awakening, to give humanity a fighting chance. The battle they were in wasn't just about defeating the enemies in front of them. It was a battle for survival itself. But the eclipse couldn't do it alone. "Now," Lara shouted, "fire everything we've got. We're not just fighting for the galaxy, we're fighting for humanity's future." The fleet, its shields faltering but not broken, fired every weapon they had. The combined force of their weapons, aided by the eclipse's power, slammed into the dark energy that the old ones had unleashed. The massive beams of energy, combined with the eclipse's overwhelming strength, created an explosion so powerful it rocked the entire battlefield. The old one's presence began to retreat, slowly at first, then faster, as the combined forces of the fleet and the eclipse pushed them back, preventing them from fully manifesting. It was a slow, desperate struggle, but the galaxy's fate was now in the hands of its defenders. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the energy waves began to dissipate. The eclipse's pulse faded, and the battlefield fell silent once more. Lara stood in awe. The eclipse had not only stopped the old ones from fully awakening, it had kept them at bay long enough for humanity to strike back. The galaxy had been saved, but the war was far from over. The eclipse had done what it was built to do, but it had also awakened something deeper, something humanity would need to fully understand if they were to survive the future. The eclipse had proven its worth. It had protected humanity, kept the galaxy from falling into darkness. But as the dust settled and the fleet regrouped, Lara knew one thing for certain. The war was not over. The eclipse had only delayed the inevitable. But for now, the galaxy was safe. Humanity had won its most important battle, and the hope that the eclipse had given them would shine bright as a new chapter of their existence began. The fight for survival had become a fight for a new future, one where humanity would rise above the darkness and face whatever challenges the galaxy would throw at them. The eclipse, the myth turned reality, had not only saved them, it had given them a new hope.